So people see all the success, and I know your assistant's listening in. They don't know all the pain, they don't know all the worry, all the anxiety, everything that goes in between. What's been the hardest year for you as you look back?
Mm, the hardest year. Mm. Uh, I think that was probably the year I had had four number no five number one bestsellers with this publisher and a couple extra in paperback only older books that got republished and succeeded. And I thought, this is more than I ever expected. Uh, and I had been with the agent for 14 years, and I had been with the publisher for, well, nearly as long, maybe 11 or 12. And uh, everybody was doing very well because of these books, but I was getting very bad terms on these books. And I didn't know any better. I didn't know I was getting an 8% paperback royalty when anyone else in my position was getting 15. I didn't know this or that. I was getting paid on contracts in six payments, one on signing, one on delivery, one on acceptance, one on paperback, one on 6 months after paperback, 1 year after. And I was told by my agent, that's the way it's always done. And at some point, I had I had earned out in hardcover, but I had all these payments that hadn't been made yet. And I
Mm.
asked the publisher, since I've earned out and I'm now making royalties, couldn't I get more of the advance payments? No, that's never done. I got highly suspicious, and I contacted a couple of best-selling writers I knew that I thought would be direct with me. And I said, look, I don't, it's an awful thing to ask you. How much are you being paid? What are the terms of your contract? I will share any information about my career that you want if you'll share it and answer some questions with me. And I got a couple of them to do it. And I was appalled. Everything the agent was telling me was untrue. Everything the publisher was telling me untrue. And I had to fire both. That was probably the worst year of my because of putting my trust in somebody who turned out to be completely untrustworthy. And it was people I liked. That was the other sad thing about it, especially the agent I felt very close to. And she always presented herself as your sister or your mother or your best friend. And none of that was the case. Then, on the other hand, that was the year I got a new agent, took me out to market, put me in a new publisher at, let's see, 4 times the advance I had been receiving and much better terms. So the worst year in some ways became at the end of it the best year.
So that would be Dean the author. I'm talking about Dean the man.
And what was the question?
The
they're,
hardest
they're
year
all
for
the
you, the hardest
hardest year.
year for you on a personal level. So that would be absolutely from a business professional side. How about you personally? Because I think many times I know that in my own world, I tend to just think business professional. But how about you? What was the hardest
I,
year for you?
I think the hardest year was the year my mother died. I was starting to see that I was going to have a successful writing career, but I hadn't published many books yet. And I wasn't at the point where I could have really helped her financially. I could barely keep our marriage and our lives afloat in terms of rent and all the rest. And but it was only a few years later, and I could see that it was only going to be. I had faith that it would be a few years, and if she lived, I could have done everything for her that you kind of dream of doing for a mother, buy her a fabulous house and do all the rest of it. But she died at 53, and it was a very hard thing, and it for the I think for the first time in my life made me acutely aware of my own mortality. When you're as young as I was in your 20s, you kind of think you'll live forever. And death of somebody that close to you starts to make you wake up to the reality that nobody does on a conscious level as well as subconscious. That would probably be the worst year.
And what do you think happens after we die, Dean? You've written a lot of books over the years. You've heard a lot of opinions. You've heard of all sorts of spiritual leaders. But what do you think?
Well, I'm a Catholic, and so I have a certain thing I believe, and I do believe it. It's something that I don't doubt whatsoever in a strange way. What I do believe is it will be different than any religion or any particular, even saintly person tells you to expect. I've had some very strange experiences in my life that at one point I will write about that tell me the world we see around us is not, we don't see the fullness of the world. There's something else to it. And a couple of times, and my wife was present when these things happen, tells me there's things that are beyond our understanding, grasp of reality. And I don't think that means it's going to be hell on earth that we go to afterwards. I think this is, I wrote a series of novels with the character Rob Thomas, and the woman he's in love with in book one says, this life is boot camp. This is where we learn how to prepare ourselves for the next life, which she calls service, although she doesn't quite know what that means. And then there is the third life, which is the eternal life. And I think I was setting myself up to write that book about the world in between. And there was a period of time I thought of doing it, but I've sort of given up on that again.
Well, it's interesting. You just mentioned your wife. Um, how did you not blow up your marriage, Dean? You were obsessed with work, clearly. How did you not blow it up?
Well, I haven't seen her last couple of hours. See if it's still intact. But she's as hard a worker as I am. We both came from poor families. Her father was a hard worker. He was a shoemaker, a shoe repairman, a little shop in town. But when she was 13, she had 3 part-time jobs and has been working all her life. So we've always been 2 engines pulling this same train. One of the big things about it is we both have the same cockeyed sense of humor. So there's a lot of laughter in the day. And it's just, there's always in every marriage moments where you go, or at least I'm sure she did, not that I ever had. And yet you get past them because of the love and also because you made the right choice in the first place. If you laugh at the same things and you laugh a lot, life goes by much more smoothly. And I think that's how we haven't blown it up. I tend to find almost everything funny.
Well, I'm sure your publisher is going to be upset with me because I didn't ask about your book. You got a new book out, apparently. I mean, you've had a lot before that, but you have a new book. I'll talk about it a little bit later, not right now. But I just wanted to get to know you, the man behind everything. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, I think, as the quote goes. You're much better looking than I thought. They definitely don't Photoshop you well. You're better looking in person, Dean. Um,
Oh, well.
my last question, not like it's like the last rites, but what are you learning today?
What I'm learning. Uh, well, hmm, I'm currently writing a novel that is very from a very unusual perspective. It's from the perspective of a sweet, uh, what would once have been called uh, uh, an idiot savant. It's his telling his story. And I've done a lot of research on this. I would put his IQ as probably around 70, 75. He speaks, and how he speaks and how he tells his story has been a great challenge and has forced me into considering and thinking about a lot of things about what is intelligence And what does less intelligence mean about your sense of the world and your sense? I've had to think about how easy it is that we dismiss people who seem not to have all their faculties, and how actually their lives may be just as complex and satisfying in their way as ours. And that's been a learning experience, not just a writing experience on this book. And it's taken me places I never would have expected to go. So I'm hopeful when I deliver it to the publisher and agent, they don't look at me like I've lost my mind. But I think the characters become so endearing that the book really works.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Well, thank you for asking.